Hi, I'm Jasmine Mulliken, Production and Preservation Manager for Digital Projects at Stanford University Press. I'll be sharing a use case for BrowserTrix Cloud from the perspective of a publisher of web content. At Stanford University Press, we are publishing standalone, peer-reviewed digital projects that live only online. What you see here is one of those publications, Filming Revolution by Elisa Lebo. I'll let the screencast play while I continue giving some background on the program so you get a sense of how complex these web publications are. The digital publishing program, which has been funded by Mellon for the past 8 years, aims to establish a parallel stream for scholarship that carries all the heft and rigor of a typical print monograph, but that allows scholars to employ the multimodal, interactive, and networked potentials of the web to surpass what is possible with the linear and static constraints of the book. These projects are not basic ebooks, and they have no print equivalent or print versions. There is no PDF. So when it comes to thinking about how to make these projects available in the future as part of the scholarly record, we as publishers have had no established way of doing that like we do for physical books. Furthermore, just preserving the files or data that make up a project also falls short of capturing the interactive reader experience and full presentation of the work in its intended context. That's why, in our grant, we proposed using web archiving as a solution for extending the life of these web-based publications to ensure they remain as much a part of the scholarly record as their traditional book form counterparts. The language in the grant was somewhat vague and of course written before we were actually faced with needing to archive anything yet. Initially, we assumed we'd be able to use Stanford Library's web archiving services, which by the time we began actively pursuing preservation in 2017, was using Archivit and an open Wayback Framework, which turned out to be inadequate for both capturing and replaying the complex JavaScript-heavy sites that we were publishing. As a result, Stanford Press carved out its own web archiving path, seeking help and partnerships beyond our own institution and finding it with Web Recorder and its evolving toolset. After a formal partnership with Web Recorder in 2020, we now have a system in place for crawling, storing, and presenting web archived versions of all our current publications. That system has continued to evolve, and most recently I have been experimenting with doing my own crawls using BrowserTrix Cloud as part of a pilot program at Stanford Libraries, which is itself seeing a resurgence in interest for web archiving. So, with all that context established, I'll focus the rest of my presentation on my use of BrowserTrix Cloud to capture our most recent publication to go through archiving, Layered Lives. I used the Stanford Library's instance of BrowserTrix Cloud, and I attempted my crawl 4 times before getting a successful full capture of the publication's content. The first attempt was on a previous instance of Cloud that we've since replaced, but I reproduced that attempt to illustrate the progression of calibrating that I applied to my configuration each time. I should also say up front that, as with all of our publications, because I personally worked on the production of this project leading up to its publication on the live web, I already had a full manifest of the site's content. Furthermore, because the press hosts these publications, I also have access to the site content on our server and can easily identify locations of content that may be missed from a crawl. Extent of capture was the first challenge I encountered, but the interface and its manual configuration settings made it easy to adjust the scope by adding additional URLs, which is what I did in subsequent attempts. The first crawl used only a primary seed URL and captured just 3 pages. Testing the replay in BrowserTrix Cloud revealed a landing page that looked perfect and links that functioned perfectly to bring me to the project's deeper content pages. But even deeper browsing began to show missing images and icons. Also missing were over 1,000 XML pages that should have opened when clicking on the individual archive entry links that pop up when exploring the map. Not only did these pages not come up, they triggered a new tab to open to a "this page isn't working" error, while back in the browser tricks window, another error was appearing in the form of a sad page icon. I also found that I was unable to manipulate the map beyond its default bounds, zoom levels, and layers, indicating map tiles were also missing from the crawl. In the next attempts, I manually added over 2,800 URLs representing the missing images, data files, and map tiles. I was now able to use the replay interface in BrowserTrix Cloud to select the landing page from the long list of pages captured, and to then browse the content almost seamlessly. The only remaining issue was the error generated by clicking on the links to the XML pages. Although these XML pages do now exist in the web archive, and I can browse directly to them if I know the URL, when I try to access this content through the links in the project, it still opens a new browser tab outside of the cloud indicating this page isn't working. The error is likely just due to a behavior coded into the original site, prompting these links to open in a new tab or window. And it's not clear whether or how BrowserTrix or Replay Web can resolve or intercept this. Despite that problem, I still wanted to test the Web Archive's functionality in the press's own instance of Replay Web. So I downloaded and then accessioned the WAXI into the Stanford Digital Repository and added the source link to the HTML at archive.supdigital.org, where our Replay Web instance is located. As expected, the new tab issue persisted, but I also uncovered another oddity. The player was defaulting to the last crawled URL, which happened to be a map tile, as its start page. I'm still actively testing and am preparing to begin crawling another publication, but in the meantime I can share just a few initial thoughts in summary. Especially of value to my particular use case has been the ability to add additional URLs to a crawl configuration. But I'm not sure why the image, XML, and data files weren't already captured from the original seed URL, which did prefix all the additional content I had to enter manually. But discovering the cause, even if it was within the original site code itself, would at least help us identify conventions to avoid in the future when we design digital projects. I also appreciated the ability to preview the replay directly in the BrowserTrix Cloud interface, so I could determine if I had done a complete crawl before having to store and load the WAXI in my own system for testing. However, it would have been helpful if the replay that was shown in the UI matched what I did end up seeing in my own system, specifically as it concerned the default starting page in the player. So further wish list items so far include the ability to assign one of the URLs in the crawl as the default starting page to be rendered in the player. Maybe this could be done simply by adding a checkbox next to items in the preview in the player, or next to the crawl configuration seed URL field, or maybe it's just an additional parameter that can be defined during the crawl configuration. Finally, it would be useful to have some mechanism built into the crawl or replay that could somehow intercept external target links so that they don't open new tabs or windows outside of the replay window. Maybe there's already a workaround for this with the current options. I haven't tried using the one-click out option, but I'm happy to know if anyone else has experienced or has advice on this issue or the start page issue. So in conclusion, the SUP use cases are still very limited, but they do represent content that's emerging and will continue to be produced, not just by SUP, but also by other publishers like MIT Press, University of Virginia Press, and many digital humanities centers and libraries who are supporting scholars whose research can no longer be presented within the bounds of a traditional book. Both Clocks and Portico, whose services publishers have long relied on for the preservation and safekeeping of their PDF and basic electronic products, are already exploring ways of building out their workflows and tool sets to support these emerging scholarly forms. As publishers, we're in the unique position of owning the rights to the content we're trying to capture, and also knowing and having server-level access to the content we're trying to capture. I can also see that authors of complex web-based digital projects would be interested in managing these kinds of preservation efforts themselves. And Browsertrix Cloud seems to be the tool for the job. As someone who has only recently begun learning web archiving myself, I certainly appreciate its intuitive and user-friendly interface. A sort of intermediate tool, more powerful and customizable than Conifer or the Web Recorder browser extension, and yet easier to interact with than command line tools, Browsertrix Cloud promises to be of great importance to the scholarly communication field, and I'm looking forward to its further development. Thank you.